Hey, what's going on, friends? My name is John Waldman. I'm a filmmaker based in New York, and today I want to talk about picture profiles. Should you shoot in log or baked in color? I primarily shoot on Sony cinema cameras, so for me, this is going to be either S-Log3 or S-Cinetone. Most cameras these days will have a log or a baked in profile, and the purpose of this video is to help you make that decision of when is the right time to shoot flat or log, or shoot in a baked in Rec. 709 color space. Obviously, I am speaking from the point of view of being a Sony owner, so I'm talking about S-Log3 and S-Cinetone, but this applies to all cameras, flat, log versus baked in color Rec. 709. If you're new to the channel, I have a lot of behind the scenes vlogs where you could follow me on set. I review gear and sometimes create tutorials like this. My perspective is unique because I'm not just a tech reviewer. I actually work in the film industry. I go out and set all the time. So here I share my experiences and knowledge so you could learn stuff and also save time. So a few years ago, I made a video about S-Cinetone when I got the Sony FX6. This was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and at that time I was still a little bit scared of shooting in log or a flat profile. Since then, a lot has changed. I primarily shoot in a log profile unless the client or production company requests otherwise, and today I'm gonna help you, kind of decide between the two. As a working DP and camera operator, I'd say this is one of my first few questions when I'm working on any new project. Hey, are we shooting this baked in color? Hey, are we shooting in log? So you're definitely gonna come across this question. So first, when should you shoot in baked color? On the Sony cameras, that'll be S-Cinetone. On your other cameras, it might be called something like Rec. 709 or something like that. One of the first big ones is you just don't have time to color grade. What if you have something that's a super quick turnaround? You don't have time to grade. Let's say you're shooting a wedding or an event. You don't wanna sit there and color grade. You just wanna get good color right out the box, especially with all that footage, and you kind of decide the extra dynamic range I get from shooting in log, as I'm shooting right now, isn't really worth the time to go through and color grade everything, because truthfully, it's only a little bit of difference in dynamic range. Another example, I've had times where I need to shoot a same day edit. In those cases, again, you just don't have time to grade. Handful of times I'm working with production companies or clients and I'm handing them off footage and they say they want baked in color. So for my Sony camera, I'm gonna switch that right over to S-Cinetone. And on that, I do really like the S-Cinetone profile. I think it's a very nice baked in color profile. Personally, I do enjoy shooting in log more. We'll get to more on that later. There's kind of pros and cons to both, but stick around. When you're shooting live, you need good color straight out of camera because it's live. There is no grading. So another reason to shoot in baked in color, you just don't feel confident in understanding your camera's log profile, and it's easier to get the good colors right out of the box. If you don't feel comfortable with your color grading and you're scared of shooting in log, shooting in baked in is totally fine. If you're just starting out shooting video, I would probably shoot with baked in color. Log is just like another step. Get good with your exposure, your settings, learn all the basics. And then when you feel like you've mastered that and you want to get a little more dynamic range out of your image, then you could go shoot log. When you're at a location where you have a lot of control over your lighting, it's gonna look really nice shooting baked in because you're able to dial everything in from your shadows to your highlights. When you're outside on a bright sunny day and you're shooting with a baked in profile, it's a lot easier to clip the highlights. It's easier for the sky to get blown out because there's so large of a difference in exposure, from your highlights to your shadows. When I'm shooting outside, I would prefer to shoot in a log profile because you're getting more data. There's a little bit more work on the back end, but again, just totally depends project to project. In some ways, I actually think shooting in a baked in color profile is harder. Let me explain. You have to be a lot more decisive about your exposure. It's easier to clip your highlights because you're dealing with a little bit less dynamic range. So I tend to shoot a little bit darker and try to really be cognizant of not blowing out my highlights. Some situations, it's just impossible. I personally lean more towards the darker side. Once your highlights are overexposed, it's pretty hard to recover them. If you are maintaining your highlights and let's say your shadows are a little dark, you could always boost that up. Me personally, I would rather take a little bit of noise in the shadows if it means much less or no clipping at all in the highlights. So now we're in S-Cinetone, still in XAVCI. I kept the camera at f2, ND is at 1/4, ND is at 1/4. I moved the ISO to 500. I could already see looking at the monitor, it's a little bit more digital and sharp, not as pleasing. I think I look better in a log image. So now you can see in the same scenario what both picture profiles would look like, S-Log3, S-Cinetone. Moving on, now let's talk about shooting in log. For my Sony cameras, that would be S-Log3. So why would you want to shoot in a log profile? You have to do all this extra work, right? Well, you're gonna get the most dynamic range out of your camera. You're gonna get the most information from the brightest point of your image to the darkest point of image. It's definitely gonna look more cinematic. I said it, get over it. In my opinion, when I'm comparing S-Log3 to S-Cinetone, sometimes I find the Cinetone to be a little bit too digital, too sharp. I personally find a log image a lot more pleasing after the grade. It looks a lot more filmic and cinematic. So if you are shooting in log, that means there is time allocated to color grade. I am by no means a colorist whatsoever. I have actually made a video before talking about matching the Sony FX6 and the Sony FX3. So quick plug, I have been religiously using phantom LUTs. They have really changed the game for me. I can load them up to my monitor, so this way, when I'm shooting, I could kind of get a preview of what the image might look like. Truthfully, that gets like 90% of my grading work done. Then I have my other tweaks. Link in the bio. I have a discount code as well. Definitely go check those out. I could not recommend them enough. Definitely try to get comfortable with both profiles and how they work. And camera to camera is definitely different. Really knowing your camera, what its strengths and weaknesses are, where you could push it, know what your base ISOs are of your camera. For the Sony FX6, S-Cinetone and S-Log3 have different bases. When you're in Cine EI shooting S-Log3, the low base is 800, the high base is 12,800. Then when you're in custom mode, you could select S-Cinetone. I believe the low base is 320 and the high base is 5,000. When you're in Cine EI shooting log, I'm only sticking to those two base ISOs. When I'm shooting in S-Cinetone, I try to stick around there, but I don't mind like jumping the ISO up. I'm a little bit more flexible with that. Again, because we're not as concerned about getting the most perfect image. It's just about getting something that looks pretty good right out of the box. If you're gonna shoot in a log or a flat profile, I highly recommend that you make sure it's in a 10-bit function. For this camera, I have XAVC-I and XAVC-L. The L is 8-bit and the I is 10-bit. Check your camera, check your settings, just make sure you're shooting in 10-bit. When you shoot in 8-bit, it's a little bit harder to grade since there's a lot less color information. It's easier for the image to get a lot muddier. I had a Sony a7S II for like 5 years, and that camera which was just a nightmare to grade because of the, I think it was a 420 8-bit color profile. So shoot in 10-bit, that's how you'll get the best colors. I recommend if you're shooting in log and you have an external monitor, load your LUTs up. A lot of monitors might already have a log to Rec 709 conversion LUT. Bonus tip, if you know what LUTs you want to use and you could load it right up, that's what I did with the Phantom LUTs. Now let's say you don't have a monitor. I know the FX6 and the FX3 have like a gamma display or a monitor LUT display. Basically you could put, for the FX3, I think it's a gamma assist display, which will basically convert your footage for viewing into Rec 709. So it looks like you're shooting in a baked in profile, but it's actually S-Log. And that's really helpful, you know, if you're just shooting on a smaller setup. And I'm sure different camera manufacturers have a similar sort of thing. Those are both great options depending on if you have a monitor or if you don't. For both of them, put zebras on your monitor, your camera monitor, see what's peaking. You never want to overexpose your footage. So right now I'm in Cine EI, which basically is for shooting in S-Log3. I'm gonna change it to custom mode. It's already preset for S-Cinetone. If you can't find it, go down to base look, select, and S-Cinetone is right there. So that's how you do that. I have a preset to switch from high base to low base. So 5,000 is the high base, 320 is the low base. All right, guys, well, that's about it. I hope this was helpful in some way. It's been a while since I made, one of these tutorial kind of videos. Let me know if this video was helpful. Definitely give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I see you in the next one. Cheers.